Hey, it's great to be back with you for one of our weekly conversations. I'm joined by Mike Busby, our pastoral intern. And tonight, we want to welcome the two co-chairs of our call committee here at St. Luke's, and that's James Hoffer and Emily Hansen. So we want to welcome both of you being with us tonight. We're going to be focusing our attention on the call committee tonight and what's going on there. So I guess I'd like to start with a kind of a personal question for both of you. What moved you to say yes when you heard the call come out that we were looking for call committee persons?
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having us on tonight. We wish we could do this in person with the congregation, but so glad we can communicate what we're doing on the call committee and share what we've done so far and a little bit about ourselves. So I have to say I'm a parent of two young people at St. Luke's, a middle schooler and a high schooler. I had the opportunity to actually go to a retreat earlier this fall, and it was such a great experience, and Michael was fabulous. And but also knowing that his time is coming to an end at St. Luke's, sadly, and really thinking about what we need as a congregation in terms of, bringing leadership, new leadership to our children and family youth program, and what that would take and the importance of that. And nurturing the faith life of young people is so critically important, as well as supporting Pastor Johnson in his role in worship and everything else. I think the need for two full-time pastors is critical for a sustainable organization on so many levels. And so I'm really excited that the council had met and really deliberated around it. It's such an important subject, and that the congregation was so active in that decision-making process and engaged. And so I was really excited about it and thrilled to have the opportunity to help serve and bring someone in.
Super.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, and thanks for having us, guys. For me, echo everything Emily said. I also I grew up, going to St. Luke's, attended starting in grammar school through, through to today. Involved in Sunday school and the weekend retreats, Sunday night volleyball. Went to the National Youth Gathering. And I was confirmed here. It's always been a place for me where I felt comfortable and I enjoyed attending. It's a place where I made lifelong friends. So for me, joining the committee, I wanted St. Luke's to be a place where children and youth can continue to enjoy coming for a Christian education. As well as for community and activities and things like that I had, so much fun with when I was growing up.
Super. So just, I guess, Emily, I'll ask you, who makes up the call committee at St. Luke's?
So it's a variety of people from different parts of the congregation, some long-term members, some younger members. Many of the members of the call committee have children or youth, or had children or youth that have already gone through the program. So, lots of different experience there, but all with a really vested interest in the children and youth program. Some of those call committee members expressed their interest right away to either to Pastor Johnson or someone else in the church council. Others their names were brought to the council, and the council decided who best would be able to serve on that committee. So it's a great variety. We have a youth representative, but really everyone who participates in music and worship and a lot of experience with the children and youth program. So I think a great representation of the congregation.
Excellent. That's wonderful. I'm wondering what maybe are the steps of the call process as well. Once we have these folks who are chosen to be a part of the committee, what are they actually involved in? What are the steps that lead us in this process?
Sure. So the call committee one of the first things we do is develop or create, it's called an MSP. And we'll go a little bit more into what the MSP is, but this is used by, it's used by the Metro Chicago Synod to determine potential candidates for us. So we sent out surveys to, survey to the congregation, and to help develop this MSP. And once that is generated and submitted, they use that to select candidates. So the Synod would select somewhere between 2 and 4 candidates based on our profile that might be a good fit for our congregation. After we have the list of candidates, the committee would review each of the candidates' profiles, conduct interviews, and eventually make a selection if there's someone that stands out to us. After this final candidate selected, we'd have a meet and greet with the congregation, and that's when you would be able to meet the potential candidate, and then we would hold a vote to determine whether or not to call them.
So when can we expect, if everything goes according to the way we designed at the beginning, when would we expect a new pastor to start?
So we gave a few weeks for the congregation to reply to the survey, and we had, I think, 190 members respond, which was so fabulous, and really excited to see such great interest in the process. And those answers to those surveys really helped generate that profile of our congregation, which covered everything from demographics to history to worship style to interests, and I think is a really great representation of who we are. So now that the Synod has it, in sort of quote normal circumstances, they would hope to bring several candidates to us for consideration within 4 to 6 weeks. We're hoping that timeline stays that way even during COVID, but certainly we'll need to be flexible there. And then we'll have time once we get those candidate finalists to interview, as James said, as well as if there's an opportunity for members of the call committee to go hear them preach, we'll certainly would love to do that. And the hope is that after the congregation has a meet and greet and can vote, that person would be installed in the congregation in October.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's excellent. And Emily, you were talking a little bit about the surveys that were sent out. So I'm wondering, James, Emily, what kind of were the responses that came back from those 190 surveys that sent out?
Yeah, we had great responses. Emily mentioned about 190 responses, which is I think one of the records for our surveys. And very few exceptions, or with very few exceptions, they were all positive.
Wonderful.
Positive about this decision for calling another pastor. So we had survey questions about what type of characteristics we were looking for, and things of that nature. What type of role we would be looking for this candidate to fill, and so in general, very positive responses though.
And the survey also asked members to talk about how they felt about St. Luke's in terms of the style of congregation, how we worship, how we view our leadership, what our role is in the community, our discipleship, our stewardship. And what was great to see was the similarity in responses and how people, there's a real shared experience at St. Luke's. And that was really great because it made it easier for us to transfer that information into our profile of the congregation. So it's wonderful when a group of people feel the same way about the place where they worship.
So what are kind of some of the skill sets that the congregation and the committee have kind of identified as being significantly important for this particular candidate?
Sure. Yeah. So the candidate, the skill sets we'd be looking for, they would be they'd be responsible for a couple different things. Directing activities and educational programming related to child, youth, family ministries. And this could include the retreats or other youth trips, service activities, events, things of that nature. We'd also be looking for them to develop new programs to enhance the curriculums for Sunday school and First Communion, confirmation. So they would be, in part, they'd be this, as the position description says, they'd be a child, youth, and family ministry-oriented pastor.
Mhm.
They would also have a liturgical and a spiritual role, so they'd have preaching and presiding responsibilities. And I don't know if there's anything to add to that.
No, I think it's a great position because, yes, it does focus on children and youth, but also we're looking for someone who can really provide that kind of pastoral support to Pastor Johnson and serve as that, a pastoral leader with pastoral care, worship, preaching. And I think that role is super important too, because we want this person to be able to help youth and family be intentional in how they participate in worship. And you need a liturgical leader to be able to do that effectively. So I think it's a big job, but we're really excited about, I think, the kinds of candidates that will be interested in serving such a great congregation.
That's excellent. And I think one of the really neat things about that is the way that, as you mentioned earlier, Emily, the way that you were able to come together, and there is a consensus about what kind of skills we're looking for in the candidates. So wonderful. I'm excited. It's exciting stuff. Now, you had mentioned earlier, James, just in terms of the process, one of the steps is that we send off our MSP, the ministry site profile, to the Metro Chicago Synod. So I'm wondering what is their role in that? How are they supportive of us as a congregation that's part of the Synod?
Sure. So after we develop this ministry service profile, so MSP, so that's we mentioned a little bit. That's a compilation of information about our congregation and our church, and the neighborhood Park Ridge. So it lists church demographics, information about our existing programs, current partnerships, future goals, and our mission statement. Again, this was developed partially by surveying the congregation as a whole to develop information on the congregation's characteristics. And it also describes what type of roles we would be looking for our new pastor to accomplish, what type of expectations we would have from them. How the Synod is involved once we submit it to them, they take this profile and reach out to candidates in the Metro Chicago area, and they have an in-depth conversation with them and try and determine if they would be a good fit. We've been working primarily with someone named Robert. He's our representative from the Synod, and we'll work with him throughout the process in this. He'll be having discussions with those candidates and relaying their profiles to us.
I think it's fantastic when it just goes up to the Synod, and then it's not only my understanding, right, is it's not just the Chicago area, but also nationwide if possible as well. So
it can
really,
be, yes.
Really someone who the Synod is really dedicated to finding someone who's a good fit for us in the midst of all of this process. So that's really wonderful.
And Robert is he's one of the assistants to the bishop.
Mm-hmm.
He is our primary contact there, which is great. So we're always working with one person who's our liaison with the Metro Chicago Synod. He came to the Synod with the new bishop of the Metro Chicago Synod, so he's really excited about his role. He's only been there for a handful of months, but he will be the person who does those in-depth interviews and tries to find candidates that he will think will be a good match for us. And then hopefully, if we're able to in person, he'll meet with the call committee, Robert will, to present those names to us and talk about the process of how he came to match them with the congregation and the reasons why he thinks they're great potential fits for us. So we're excited to be working with him, and I think it's another example of why the synod relationship, synod relationship is so important for individual congregations in a way that their service is crucial to how we work as a church.
So it sounds like the synod does a lot of screening as well. So it's not like exactly like a secular search where you would
Right.
get 100 candidates and you'd be sifting through all of these resumes. They're doing the search basically and then presenting you with a number of initial candidates. Is that how it works?
Right, and
Correct.
those candidates would have filled out their rostered paperwork to show that they're interested in looking at other congregations. We, as the council had decided and as the congregation approved, we're looking for anyone from 0 to 12 years of experience. So it could be someone who is coming from a first call, but it could be someone who hasn't been in a congregation yet, has other experience with youth and family. So there's a range of experience that we're looking at, but 0 to 12 years in the ELCA is kind of that baseline. They'll start with the Metro Chicago Synod looking at candidates, and then they'll expand out. We didn't want to limit them in terms of geography, in terms of where they're looking.
Cool.
Great. So another part of the process that I think is important, right, is the big question about, will the congregation get to meet the candidate before we take a vote?
Yes.
Yeah, so yes, absolutely. So one of the last steps in the process, after we have received candidate profiles, we've interviewed, we've hopefully gone to see them, preach, COVID permitting. We would make a selection of a final candidate, and at that point we would bring them to St. Luke's, have a meet and greet. And it would, so it'd be either during coffee hour or after the second service, and be a chance for the congregation to meet them, ask questions, and just chat with them to learn about them. And then at that point we would vote. We would vote on whether or not to call them. Yeah.
Excellent.
So
Now,
I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
no, go for it, Pastor Johnson.
So I was just going to ask, a lot of times, I think traditionally, when you call a second pastor, that second pastor's call is in one way or another related to the pastor that's already there. So if the lead pastor retires or resigns or leaves for whatever reason, usually the associate then is kind of, or not the associate in this case, but can you give us a distinction as to how different this particular call will be than to have someone, they have two pastors leave at the same time?
So this position is, and this was determined in part of the reason that the council came to the congregation initially around the addition of this position. This staff pastor will not be coterminous with the lead pastor, and that means that their term does not end with the term of Pastor Johnson, and that is really critical and important. It's in the job description and part of the ministry profile that the candidates understand that we fully expect and want for this position to continue on after Pastor Johnson's retirement. Really critical for leadership and sustainability, and sort of continuing the programs that are happening, and that we don't experience a gap in leadership. So we're being very intentional about making sure that our candidates know that we expect and would want this position to stay on after the lead pastor has transitioned away.
Great. So Mike, you've been here for almost 2 years.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll ask you as well as everyone else. Why does a congregation need two pastors?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that we've heard over the years and throughout this process really is the deep need for pastoral leadership within our church. We have a wonderful church which is full of leaders. However, within the pastoral role, there's certain responsibilities, right? And so really this new pastor's responsibilities are really important on two fronts here. One responsibility, as the position describes, would be to focus on children, youth, and families of the congregation. And I've been blessed to be able to work with Jerry Mears in particular with our confirmands over the last 2 years, and it's been an excellent experience for my internship and to be able to work alongside Jerry. As we look at the scope of children, youth, and family, it's a lot bigger than a part-time position, or it's a full-time position, right? And so that's one of the reasons. And secondly, as we look towards kind of seamless transition, if and when you retire, rather when you retire, Pastor Johnson, it's not a question of if, it will be a little ways down the road, but looking at that really seamless transition of having someone in the pastoral role, to not have an interim pastor. We would have someone who would be able to continue to provide pastoral care and support, to be able to continue to preside at worship on a regular basis. And so those are a few of the reasons as we look towards having that second pastor. There's just so much opportunity to engage our community, so much opportunity to continue to provide more care and support for children, youth, and family in particular. I think as we were looking at this, pastoral care coverage has changed in our church over the last 10 years. When we did have 2 pastors, we were looking at something around 160 hours or so in previous iterations on a monthly basis of pastoral care coverage. Now, between you and I'm at the church 20 hours a week, and you're at the church 60 hours a week, it feels like. And so having that opportunity to have a second pastor there to provide more pastoral care coverage as well.
Thanks. Did you guys want to add anything more to that in terms of the second?
Oh, that was great. That was great.
Okay, great.
Michael knows better than anybody, so that was great.
Yes, he does.
Well,
so obviously, we've kind of alluded to this question all night long about COVID-19, and it certainly has an impact. And I know that in at least a couple of survey questions that came back, that, is it risky to be engaging in calling a pastor during this time that's so unsettling? And I know the call committee has talked about that a little bit. We can either talk about the financial uncertainties that come with this, or just the idea of having to call somebody when you can't really get out and meet them necessarily in the same conventional way. So have you as a call committee thought about that, or do you have any kind of response to the riskiness of this process going on right now?
Sure. Yeah. So as a committee, it's COVID has made it a little more challenging. Obviously, we've as a committee, we've been meeting remotely in order to minimize risk to everyone. So whether it be Zoom or Zoom calls, as the Senate works through candidate selections, Robert has mentioned that he likes to meet with them in person, but he'll be working through the process in a similar fashion, just doing either phone screenings or video screenings to have those in-depth discussion with the candidates. The hope is obviously that the pandemic passes and we're able to begin to meet these candidates in person and go see them preach at their home churches if they're currently preaching, and of course conduct interviews in person. And we're adapting and trying to remain flexible to how the virus is affecting everyone through that process. Financially, actually looking at the numbers right now, we're in good shape. We're actually about $10,000 ahead of where we were this time last year in 2019. You know, and of course, we're going to continue to monitor that. And if we, you know, if it becomes clear it's not prudent to move forward, we will, you know, we will of course suspend the search for a period of time.
Yeah, I think we will follow the process as naturally as we can. Obviously, COVID is constantly changing, and we'll follow the guidelines of the 5-phase plan that Governor Pritzker announced. It's important that the call committee and the congregation and the candidates are comfortable with how we're proceeding. So, hopefully, we'll be in a little better place in 6 weeks than we are right now. But I think we'll just take it one day at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what everyone's doing right now.
Right.
But to just stop everything and not do anything probably doesn't make sense either.
Right.
Right.
The work that's been done now really is not going to change, even if it gets suspended for several months until a vaccine is formed. So it's not like it's wasted time, but we don't, it could be that this might be the very best time to be looking at a candidate and putting ourselves in that kind of position. So I think it's very important to just continue that work. And certainly the council and the executive committee feel the same way. So anything else that you would like to add or talk about or share with the committee that we've missed in some of our questions tonight?
No, I think we just, want the congregation to know that the committee is really excited about the work that's happened so far and the participation and by the congregation and their interest and passion about it. And we hope that we represent their interests the best that we can, and I really look forward to sharing regular updates with the congregation as we move forward in the process.
Great. James?
I think that sums it up pretty well.
Well, I'll just add an extreme thanks. The work that you are doing in terms of discerning what is next for the congregation and alongside with the congregation is very important. I will say that as a seminarian, the call process is for myself looming on the horizon, and to know that there's folks like you all on call committees across the ELCA is very exciting, and also it reduces my anxiety knowing that people who are going through call processes are in good hands like yourself. So thank you so much for the work that you are dedicating yourselves to during this time. And we look forward to hearing updates.
Yeah, Mike, I would just add that in my years of experience, I've met with lots of call committees and been on both sides of it in terms of calling candidates as well as being a candidate myself. And I can honestly say, and I'm not expanding this, that this committee is one of the very sharpest, most powerful call committees I've ever seen. And the work that they've done on the MSP is remarkable. I think we even got a comment back from the Synod today after they're reading it that it's one of the best profiles they've seen in a long, long time. And got a kudos to Lisa Ramsey. Lisa Ramsey, as well as Carol Mezzarandino, did a lot of the preliminary background work on that. So that was really helpful. But it's a great committee, and I'll tell you what, when candidates have a chance to meet our call committee, they will get a really good understanding of the seriousness as well as the commitment that this congregation has towards ministry in Park Ridge. So it's very, very exciting. And I want to thank you, Emily, and you, James, and Mike, always. Thank you so much for hosting this. Any other thoughts from anybody?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Well, we have a great day, and we'll be posting this soon. And if you have any questions beyond what we talked about tonight, you're always welcome to contact Emily or James or Mike or I, and we can pass that on to them in terms of any concerns or additions that you would like for them to consider. So thanks so much.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you
good
all.
night.